what we're ultimately doing is we are adding a new service to our software or to our products, that we need to figure out how do we bake in a pricing. But it's not as easy as before, because think of it this way: in the past, when we were building apps, you would just say, okay, we want a new service, so we have to pay a developer to do additional work, and then that has a price tag. But now it's a different story, because it's no longer just a human behind the scenes. There's a data layer. There's, I think, a new future whereby companies are not necessarily going to just be using base models, but training their own models or distilling models or fine tuning. If you train a model that has a single function, like predict a hurricane, probability of a hurricane, right? You ultimately come up with a price tag per invocation or per request of that. But when you're baking that API call to your model into your SaaS, there's other things you may want to consider as well. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic, because you should find ways to get a very granular way of pricing out your AI and your data in that manner.
So then, do you think that AI will be very expensive for the next 12 to 24 months? So some shift to usage-based pricing will be necessary to preserve margins, or you think it's going to kind of commoditized and it will be just baked into the regular cost of doing business the same way as like AWS is now?
I have such strong opinions. Like, think of it this way. Ultimately, I think it's like anything else where you're doing consumption based versus just fixed fee or fixed price sort of thing, where you try to look at your cost curves, right? And then you try to understand, like, hey, if we were to bake in AI into our new service or our existing service, right? Can we estimate, you know, again, if you're using like tokens as the granular method, how many tokens is it going to be? Or how many API calls is it going to be? Or how much data is required, if possible? And maybe you run free for a few months, which a lot of people do. Some of my customers are doing that now too. They're like, hey, we don't know how much our model's worth, so let's just let them hit it a few times.
To summarize what you said, we don't expect that there will be this mass move into usage-based pricing for everything that contains AI engines. It will be, in a way, similar to what we see right now, which is big corporate company, the big enterprise companies still prefer fixed rate, even if it is higher. Smaller companies that can dial their usage up or down, and they don't mind that one quarter they pay a bit more, another quarter much less, they would still prefer those more usage based, like token based pricing, which is not really far from what the trends that we see right now for kind of non AI software.
Now, you also asked, is the price of AI going to go up? We've been using for the last 3 years these blunt force large LLMs that have so much knowledge across the web. But I could argue that the individual company or user only uses a small percentage of the model, you know what I mean, of the model's capability, but they will eventually have more, at least function or industry specific models that are much smaller, because you don't need a model with 700 billion parameters that knows everything about 1820s music if you don't ever care, you know what I mean? And it's a lot of waste of training, it's a lot of waste of storage, and it goes into the cost.
That's right. I didn't think about it that way. So, like on ChatGPT, I can ask it to analyze my stock portfolio and also analyze my medical records, and it
Yeah, and your diet or what? Yeah, exactly.
does everything, right?
Yeah, it can, and again, you're paying for that convenience of doing everything, but it does so much. And again, just like our brains, we want to use a small percentage of it. People are only using a small percent of the model at any time.
Right.
So why should we pay, even if it's at a token price per token? Why should we be paying for the breadth of the entire world's knowledge when you only need it for certain, either again verticals, horizontals, functions, stuff like that? So the problem that we've seen so far in industry is that it just costs so much to retrain new models, and then being able to subset the web is not an easy thing, right? So when Google spiders it, it just says here's the entire index, the entire corpus, and to be able to subset just for sports or just for retail or whatever, even if you're going vertical based, would be a challenge. So but we will see that eventually, because again, the models are not being used, they're being wasted to a large degree, and people are paying for that. So web surface data is 3% of the entire data on the web. The most of it's the dark web. And the entire web as a whole represents less than 1% of all the data that exists in the world. while we as humans and media says, oh, these chat GPTs and Geminis know everything. They only know less than 1%, 3% of 1%. You know what I mean? If they know everything on the surface web. So the majority of the data is offline. Majority of the data is not indexed or known by these models. And what we try to do is when somebody asks a question, at least starting with analytical type questions and data, we can bring that question from the data center to the model. So it
So
bridges
that
that.
kind of digging for that incremental data sources is going to be exponentially more expensive the deeper we get.
Absolutely. Like it's almost like mining for gold. You know what I mean? When the first people got there, there was a lot of gold. It was easy to find.
Hmm.
But then over time, it gets harder and harder to find smaller and smaller bits of it. So,
Like we need to do the fracking now.
yeah, exactly. And what we're offering is a way into a gold mine, but you can't get the entire gold. You can only get like, flakes of it when you need it. That's sort of the analogy.